Okay. All right, welcome to the State of the U.S. Canadian Fabric Graphics Market webinar. I'm Mike von Wachenfeld, Chairman of the FGA Division, and I have a few brief announcements before we begin. Attendees will be muted during the call. All questions should be entered into the chat section, which will be handled by myself or Valerie Kuchum, who is the Vice Chair of the FGA following the webinar presentation. If we are not able to get to all of the questions, Jeff Rasmussen will respond to these questions after the webinar. If the question is complex and requires further investigation, Jeff will note this in his response, and he will handle these questions following the IFAI Expo. A copy of the Fabric Graphics Market Research Report will be mailed out to FGA members in November. If you would like a copy of the webinar PowerPoint, please contact Christine Gerard following the webinar. Her email can now be found in the chat box of the webinar. The IFAI's Market Research Department is led by Jeff Rasmussen, Market Research Manager. He holds an MBA and has over 20 years of market research experience for a wide array of organizations. His experience includes the areas of customer satisfaction studies, custom market research studies, as well as industry and competitor analysis. Mr. Rasmussen's work at IFAI includes researching and writing industry articles that are published in the IFAI's flagship journal, Specialty Fabrics Review. He also develops and writes industry reports as well as presentations that have been presented at numerous events over the years. Each year he authors IFAI's annual report on the state of the specialty fabrics industry. Other reports by Jeff include in-depth overviews of the industrial U.S. fabric specialty market segments, such as geosynthetics market, the marine market, the awning fabric market, and more. Lastly, he works with a variety of IFAI clientele on fee-based projects, delivering in-depth reports on specialty fabric market segments, such as narrow fabrics, fabric graphics, and fabric structures. So Jeff, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. We're going to start this off. I have a content slide you can all see now. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the methods that we use to develop the content for this webinar, which a good gist of it was from an online survey in late May, early June. And then we'll move on to the demographics of the respondents that were surveyed. And after that, we'll then discuss really the heart of the presentation, which is the state of the U.S. Canadian fabric graphics trends, opportunities, and threats in fabric graphics market in 2015, market segment profile. What that means is we'll take a look at the indoor and outdoor banners, the POP signage market, trade show graphics, flags, and decor textiles. And then we'll take a look at major participants, manufacturers, and distributors operating in the market. And then we'll do an outlook. Now, first real slide for this presentation starts with the introduction, much of which I already went through with you just a few seconds ago. But I wanted to say, at least with the first bullet, that the market focuses mostly on the U.S. fabric graphics market. I know it says U.S. and Canada, but the bulk of it is centered more on the U.S. The other two bullets I already went through. Then in the methodology, I mentioned that we've done an online survey. We launched it on May 27th, 2015, of course, and we closed it a couple weeks later on June 10th. 221 U.S. and Canadian fabric graphics members, and there were some non-members, were surveyed. And then these folks that were surveyed included in product manufacturers, print shops, and suppliers and distributors. And what we got back was 37 completed responses, which gives us a 17% response rate. Then the overall results were also supplemented with secondary research, as well as some telephone interviews that we employed to capture really a fuller understanding of the market. Now I'm going to start with the demographics. We had asked respondents, are you a member of the Fabric Graphics Association? And it's about a 60-30 split, 63% saying yes and 31% saying no. And then there was a small percentage of 6% who weren't sure and said don't know. And then we wanted to know, how much time has their organization operated in the fabric-graphics market. And this was really great. We had 50% almost who said they were more than 20 years have been operating in the market. And then we had about a quarter, in other words, 23% who said they had been operating about 6 to 10 years. So that was wonderful, getting that, some really seasoned people who were answering the survey. So we got some good results. 11 to 15 years was 14%, and 16 to 20 years operating in the market was 8%, and then 1 to 5 years was 3%. And then we also asked folks or respondents, to what was the split in their fabric graphic sales in 2014, say between the United States and Canada. And it was basically an 80-20 split, 82% for the United States and 18% for Canada. And then next we asked, what other fabric graphic organizations do you belong to, or does your organization belong to, in addition or aside from the Fabric Graphics Association? And the two big, the most prominent ones was the Specialty Graphic Imaging Association, or SGIA, 60% or 59%. And then ISA, or International Sign Association, was at about 19%. So, that's almost 80% right there. So that was easily the most mentioned. And then you had FESPA, and then you had some miscellaneous others. Also, on the demographics, we wanted to know, where were they in capacity of their job title in their organization? And almost half, 49%, said they were either an owner, a president, or chief executive officer. And about 20% or 18% said they were a product manager. So that was where the bulk of it came from. And then we had sales manager at 9%, director of marketing at 6%, and then we had about 6 others split up between being consultant, being a sales, sourcing manager, or VP or VP finance. And then also we wanted to know, in terms of demographics, what type of fabric graphic organization they were. Over half, about 52%, responded that they were an end product manufacturer. And about a quarter, or 25%, said they were a supplier, and then you had 11% saying that they were a distributor, and then we had print shops at 8%, and then we had miscellaneous other at 3%. Now, just to get a little more granular, the organizational profile we looked at in terms of sales, in terms of their size. We wanted to know for 2014 their sales profile as well as employees. What was really interesting was that over half, 56%, said they had $1 million or more in sales. And to go hand in hand with that, more than 66% of them, or 2/3, said they had more than 20 employees. So the bulk of them were larger organizations. And then you can see the split on the sales profile. The next largest camp of folks was less than 50,000, and then 15% were 100,000 to 250,000. And then on the employee side of things, 11% that said their number of employees was about 11 to 15. And then there was 2 to 5 for 8%, and then it fell off on the others, as you can see. And then rounding out the demographics, we wanted to know what region of the country these respondents were. 8 companies were out of the Midwest, 8 were from the Northeast, and 8 were from the Southeast. And then you had the Pacific with 3 in Rocky Mountains. Now for Canada, the response, Nova Scotia was known for 2 organizations. Alberta had 1, Ontario had 1, and Quebec had 1, so there was 5 in Canada. Now we're getting into the what I would call the guts of the presentation, and I'm starting out with the state of the U.S. specialty fabrics market because it's really the environment with which all markets, particularly in this case the fabric graphics market, operates in. So it's very much impacted by what's going on in the overall economy. So there's one slide on this. And really this is actually good news for us in that sales of specialty fabrics were up about 2.2% in 2014, and we figure they're going to be up between, say, 2.5% to 2.7% this year for 2015. It's a good job environment. The pricing for gas and the oil prices and gas prices have been down, so it's really helped people, and this goes to helping drive consumer spending, which is about the third bullet down here. But also helping consumer spending is unemployment being reduced. The workforce, more people are working now. Unemployment was 7.4% in 2013. It went down a little more than 1% in 2014 to 6.2. And as of August, it was 5.1% for as of August 2015. So that's great. And this has all helped to drive this next bullet, which is real consumer spending, which was about 2.5% in 2014, but darn near 3% this year. So people are spending money. Also, another bullet, consumer confidence. This is bolstering some of the things I've been saying here. This really helps in that people have the belief that the economy is moving in a forward direction. It's expanding. So the higher the number, this is good news then. For example, it was about 87 or 86.9 in 2014, which is 14 points higher than the 73.1 we saw in 2013. Now, for this year, it was most recently 91 in July and over 100, 101.5 in August. So this is good news. One of the things that we've also comparing is GDP, which was about 2.4% in 2014. It had been down at 1.5% in 2013, so it's moving up. And now for this year, you see a range from 1.8 to 2.1, but we really feel it's going to be on the higher end. It could be 2.1 to, say, anywhere from up to 2.3 in this year. One of the things that also is crucial, because a lot of the organizations in the fabric graphics market are smaller folks. They have 10 or less people in their organization. So getting credit or capital to expand their business, being able to do that is really important. There was an organization called Dun & Bradstreet, and within that they have an organization called Dun & Bradstreet Credibility, and along with Pepperdine University School of Business, put together an index, a capital index, which gauges small businesses' ability to access that capital. And they surveyed about 3,600 folks, and this was in the first quarter of this year, by the way. And of those folks, 28% said, hey, you know, we think we will perform much better. And almost 50%, 48%, said they'd perform somewhat better than 2014. But yet, they also said 63% cited that there'd be a real challenge in raising equity financing. And they also said 61% of them said that if it was debt financing, there would still be a challenge there also. And there's an interesting comparison on this next bullet. It really matters how large the organization, it does make a difference, is in terms of the success of getting capital, getting a loan to grow their business. If it's less than 5 million sales, their success rate was 35%. But if they were anywhere between $5 and $100 million in sales, their success rate was 85%. On the next bullet, we're talking about material costs or raw material costs. And this has been a big boom. We touched on it a little bit with the lower gas prices and oil prices. But just to show a point of comparison, oil came in at about $93 a barrel in 2014. Now this year, right now, it's at about $54 a barrel, and it's projected in 2016, excuse me, it was $50 a barrel in 2015. Apologize for that. And in 2016, we're looking at $54 a barrel. There still are import pressures from the likes of Asia, in particular, China in particular there. Their GDP was about 7.4% in 2014 and it's actually being driven down at about 6.8% this year. And some of this has a lot to do with they refocused their strategy in that they're trying to move their economy being driven more from their domestic economy and trying to lessen their reliance, over-reliance sometimes on exports. And so that's hit on this. But they've also been hit most recently in, I'm talking about China now, in their stock market woes since about June of this year. That has really affected things in terms of China, just because they're basically the 800-pound gorilla in terms of import pressures on the United States and Canada. Greece is also another phenomenon that's really affected the European Union. They've been having woes now for a couple, 3 years now, and it'll be interesting how that plays, but it does affect demand in Europe, and it does affect our markets to a degree. So these are important factors to take into consideration when we look at our fabric graphics market. Now, taking a look at the fabric graphics market, the state of the U.S. and Canadian fabric graphics market, the majority, now this is from the survey we had done in May and in June of this year. The majority of the fabric graphics companies stated that they have forecast that they think there will improve sales in 2015 compared to 2014. In fact, over 81% of the respondents in our online survey said that sales will be better this year than it was in 2014. One of the things, I'm going back to this GDP figure, the U.S. GDP between for the period of time of 2007 to 2014 was really anemic at about 1.1%. Now, I say this because this really drove and helped keep kind of a lid on the fabric graphics growth from rising above anything above 2 to 4% per year during that period of time. But fabrics graphics in product market in particular is experiencing because of this problem, they're experiencing wide use of what we call low pricing tactics to get business or more sales simply. But the problem with this is it really hurts and narrows profit margins. But since 2012, the fabric graphics market has grown about 2 to 4% a year, which is a far cry better than where we were in 2009 when it was down some 18%. Many of the end product manufacturers and or the print shops, we talked about the widespread low price tactics have resisted lowering prices to garner more sales because they want to try to maintain their profitability, and they believe that their products are worth what they charge. But they're also refraining from increasing prices, I must say, because they also have the fear that they may lose customers. To increase sales over the last handful of years, in product manufacturers and print shops have invested in diversifying their portfolio of market segments that they serve, such as awnings and canopies and green banners. They've also invested in more efficient, faster template printers as well as wider printing equipment to take on the demand, the increasing demand for wider fabrics. They've also added digital graphics applications to their offering, and this includes banners, for example, in airport terminals, outdoor banner advertising, like you'll see teardrop banners more and more today, and then indoor soft signage. Actually, the indoor soft signage has really made an impact in terms of being more of a presence versus, say, rigid signage. And then in 2014 and 2015, we're starting to see more of an increase, I would say, in the transition from vinyl PVC banners to polyester fabric banners. And the thing on that, when we've talked to customers and surveyed them, they generally like the look of fabric over vinyl. And then there's also, of course, the green issue or the waste problem, what to do with all that PVC. And now I'm going to get into some graphics, and on the graphics will generally be on the right, and I describe them on the left. In this particular slide, you see the fabric usage in 2014 in the fabric graphics market. And this is based on a share of the market, percentage share. Polyester was definitely far away the most used fabric, and they came in at about 34%. And then we had vinyl laminated polyester at 18%, and PVC coated polyester at 17%. So you can see polyester overall really commands, I think it's like 69% of the market. And then we have acrylic, solution dyed acrylic, which came in fourth at about 12%. And the solution dyeing, shop owners or customers like that, because it reduces the fading and the deterioration that can occur from UV exposure. They also like it because it's a very versatile fabric. They can sometimes stock fewer types of fabric because it's available in some 100 solids, colors, stripes, and patterns. And then fifth was the fifth most used fabric was nylon, which came in at about 10%. And it's used a lot in the flake market. Next, we look at a graphic on a percentage breakout of 2014 sales for the fabric graphics market by market segment. And as a percent of the overall organizational fabric graphics sales in 2014, respondents cited it came in at 26%. Outdoor banners and signs was the #1 market cited for this. And then second was the trade show graphics market, which came in at 17%. And indoor graphics, banners, and signs came in at 12%. Then you had flags at 11%, and POP signage at 9%, and then decor textiles coming in at about 4%. Now, what I wanted to cover on this next slide, you see a lot of data and so forth, but what we did is we took the fabric graphics market and put it into segments. We had the indoor banners and signs, outdoor banners and signs, POP signage, trade show graphics, flags, and then decor textiles. Those were in columns. And in rows, we had the market size in 2014 in terms of US dollars. And on that one, outdoor banners and signage is about $355 million in sales for that market. And then the second largest one was trade show graphics at about $232 million. And third was indoor banners and signs at $164 million. Then you had flags, which traditionally stays pretty much very year to year resilient. It doesn't jump way up, it doesn't go way down, but it stays at around $150 million in sales. And then we have decor textiles at about $55 million. Now, in terms of growth rate, we have growth rate figures in the next row for 2014, and then after that, we have them for 2015 for each of these markets. The fastest growing, though, in either of 2014 or 2015 was decor textiles at about 40%. And then second was POP signage coming in around 30%, and then trade show graphics at around 25%. And then you have the others at 15 to 20%, which was indoor banners and flags. Now, trends. Second to the last row, #1 trend. A lot of it was, for example, on the outdoor banners and signs was UV textile printing. Same thing for indoor banners and signage. And then POP, again, UV. So UV was a big deal. And then in trade shows, latex and pigment textile printing. And then for flags and decor textiles, it was direct dye printing. Now the second trend was a little different. Was for indoor banners was latex and pigment textile printing, and the same thing for outdoor banners and signage, latex, pigment, textile printing, and the same thing again for POP signage. But for trade show graphics, tension fabrics is what was expressed in the surveys and in interviews is the new trade show standard. It's very popular. Also, the exhibitors like it a lot, just because it's easy to work with and does a great job of showing off their exhibit and products. And then in flags, there's direct pigment printing, and same thing for decor textiles. One of the things I wanted to put is at the very bottom of the screen is the overall market size, which includes an other category. But overall, it's about $1.36 billion that we have it pegged at. Now, we move on to an area in terms of new fabric graphic market segments that respondents or companies that are engaging themselves in. And the number one market really new market segment that organizations are more and more taking on was the 29% of them said awnings and canopies was the market segment that they participated in the last 12 months, or that they plan on participating in, say, in the next 12 months. And of those, 30% of the awnings includes some type of, particularly commercial awnings, includes some type of graphics printed on them. So that's why that market segment works well for the fabric graphics market. And 18% of all respondents cited indoor graphics market segment as the new fabric graphics market segment that they have immersed themselves in the last 12 months or plan on doing so in the next 12 months. In the retail market has, and I mentioned this briefly before, it has really impacted the growth in terms of it versus rigid signage. It's a warmer feel for the customers. They provide high quality images, and they do really well in the SEG frame structure market. And then I want to just say real quickly, eco-friendly products or green banners came in fourth at 14% as far as new market segment, and then event graphics came in about 11%. Then we had miscellaneous other at around 12%. Then the next thing we wanted to look at is the breakout of imaging processes used by in-product manufacturers as well as print shops this year in the U.S. and Canada fabric graphics market. Well, the dye sub transfer was easily the most mentioned or cited imaging process used by respondents at 28% of all the imaging processes used this year. And to solve it is been really resilient. It was cited at 19%, by 19% of all the images process used in the fabric graphics market for the U.S. and Canada. So it still has a very strong presence. And then the use of very much a growing, and I call it burgeoning, the market segments of latex and UV curable imaging processes in the U.S. and Canada fabric graphics market. They've captured, as you can see, 16 and 13% of the share market, 16% for latex and 13% for curable. Then you have the others, which is direct dye sub at 10, EcoSolvent at 7, aqueous at 2, and electrostatic was fairly negligible, it was less than 1%, and then you have a miscellaneous other at 5. Next, I wanted to talk about suppliers in terms of trends that were cited in terms of suppliers for the fabric graphics market. What they really should, and after that, the way this is set up is I've got the trends in the left column and impact of those trends in the right column. So one of the trends was that there's been a real increase in the SEG framing systems, and the impact of that is that it's helped the increase of backlight as well as frontlight fabric signage growth. There's an increasing demand for 10-foot wide print equipment, which adds another revenue stream for in-product manufacturers as well as print shops. And then new printing technologies have improved. There's more durable, faster print heads today that are producing really extraordinarily brilliant colors. And this is helping increase printer sales, and I put in some of the major manufacturers there, HP, Canon, and so forth. And at the printer, the impact of that is also there's more reliable printers, say under $300,000, as well as in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. There's been respondents were seeing an introduction of new inks like latex and UV fade resistant inks, which helps to extend the life of the impact being extending the life of the graphic on products because the inks last longer. And then one of the things we also saw that was brought up from both the response as well as the secondary research is global, worldwide, the wide format printer shipments grew about 2%, 2.1 in 2014. Basically, aqueous was down, but that was offset by the growth in latex, eco-solvent, dye-sub, and UV curable. And one of the things that really came up in some of the discussions with folks that we talk with is digital print growing. It is up to about 15% in 2014, and I think it was there and also around 2013 also, but we had it pegged at 10% in 2010, so it's really moved up, which transcends into more sales for fabric graphics manufacturers and print shops, as well as suppliers. One of the neat things that we kind of touched on this briefly, that there's more point-of-purchase business being seen, particularly in the retail, which we really mentioned, this off-site engine retail. We're also seeing home fashion decor fabrics printing more, like on walls or on furniture, for example, curtains and so forth. There's more, and the impact of all that is more sales of fabric in several market segments, like the POP segment, which I mentioned. They're also seeing more in the outdoor flag or banner market and in the home fashion decor market. There's also more usage outdoors in terms of teardrop flags or banners by retailers. There's more PVC coated lightweight mesh being used in indoor and outdoor advertising. And this gives retailers the ability to use cost-effective advertising tool to draw in more customers. And the PVC coated mesh that was used in advertising has also been used in theater backdrops, as well as walls and on buildings. Now, some of the trends for end product manufacturers that were cited, particularly in the survey last spring, is there's been a real increase in really tight turnaround times of projects. Customers are being more demanding here. And what they've had to do is bring in more temporary employees in times of, say, high project demands. There's also been more competition for banners and awnings, which is, we've seen some decrease in sales and the narrowing of profit margins for domestic folks. But one of the things about the international market on import products coming in to bring in more competition for banners and awnings is that the import products that have been coming in the United States, one of the advantages they have is that they don't have to meet the same what we call manufacturing constraints as the U.S. manufacturers. In other words, there's really not an EPA or an OSHA overseas. Customers are demanding also, the next trend, customers are demanding more skilled and knowledgeable workers. So in-product manufacturers have to invest more time and energy into training of the workers. Also their sales staff to help boost professional sales staff to help boost their sales and service to the customer. More graphics are, and I mentioned this also before, but more graphics are being printed on the tension fabric, polyester, and spandex. We're seeing more of these tension fabrics, the impact being we're seeing more of them at the trade show. And then more or improved better marketing on the internet is helping more web exposure for the end product manufacturer, which is really helping many of them in terms of driving more sales, in terms of traffic, leads, and completed sales, and it also helps build their brand in the eyes of their customer. I mentioned this briefly before, but there was an increase in the SEG frame system silicon and graphics market, which provides high-quality images, and also it's a very cost-effective display for folks versus the rigid graphics, and they're easy to change out, particularly at trade shows. Capital. We talked about this a little bit at the very beginning of the presentation. The capital loans, that has freed up a little bit. It's gotten a little easier to get versus, say, past years, particularly just right after the recession of 2009. But it is still challenging, as we had mentioned, like I said earlier in the presentation, especially for those firms that are under $5 million in sales. Some end product, the impact of that is that some end product manufacturers and print shops just don't have the funds, or they lack them to be able to buy new equipment and effectively compete with larger folks, competitors, and so it constrains their ability to grow at times. Now, I wanted to talk in the next couple of slides. We're going to start with the opportunities, and then we're going to go into some of the threats for end product manufacturers this year. Suppliers cited as far as opportunities go is that there's been a real increase that they've seen in green fabric technology, the faster printing speed of printers, which has helped boost their productivity. There's more durable fabrics. They've seen the rise in the use of latex print and ink technology. There's UV print technology that they've seen for opportunities, and again, we've mentioned this before, but the silicone edge graphics market. Now, manufacturers or print shops also have cited what they've seen for opportunities in direct-to-print graphics onto fabric. They've seen patterned polyester, improved or better cutting and patterning technology. Print shops called out automated sewing is an opportunity going forward. And also the increased use of wider fabrics, like 3 to 5 meters of fabric being driven by the increased demand for wide as well as grand format printing. Printing graphics on fabrics for use at trade shows. This is another opportunity that was cited, as well as POP signage and banners and signage for retail. Much improved and longer-lasting inks for outdoor use. They resist UV rays better than in the past in non-solvent category. Diversifying their print offering to cover a variety of substrates and or environments. Now, some of the threats that were mentioned, particularly for end product manufacturers this year, suppliers cited electronic advertising, in that they felt that the technology might be changing too fast, and that sometimes it might hold back the buying decision for customers who are trying to make up their mind on what direction they want to go. In terms of technology, there's inexpensive import competition, which we mentioned. That's basically getting stronger from the likes of China in particular, but Asia overall. U.S. manufacturers, when there are pricing pressures, they sometimes don't respond well from the competition from overseas, and will move too fast to drop. In reaction to that, they'll drop their prices too fast and maybe too far down, instead of holding on and trying to maintain their profit margins. And then suppliers also cited stagnant economic growth, especially in the first quarter of this year, but also the last couple of years. And a lot of this had to do with poor weather, particularly with the harsh winters we've seen in recent past, particularly on the northeast coast this last winter. Manufacturers and print shops have cited some of the threats: more competition domestically, and from the inexpensive imports, which the suppliers had also mentioned. And also for them, it's really hard sometimes to deal with the cost of healthcare. It's an increasing cost of business over the last few years, in particular Obamacare, that they've had to wrestle with. And a challenge that they've had is a couple of these next two bullets. Over the years, shortage of skilled labor sometimes has been an ongoing challenge for them, but also the shortage of materials available because projects are being asked to be turned around faster and faster. So sometimes that's hard to meet. And then there's obviously the traditional challenge or threat of local science codes that sometimes hold back the use of science due to restrictions. Now this is a new area we're getting into, the major participants in the U.S. and Canada fabric graphics market. There are approximately, we estimate, about 1,800 companies operating in the U.S. and Canada fabric graphics market, but there's also about 30,000 U.S. signage and print shops. Now, of that 1,800 that I mentioned previously, about 100 of them are suppliers or fiber folks, yarn guys, materials folks, distributors, equipment organizations, and about 1,700 of them are in product fabricators of products. And I touched on this just real briefly earlier. Most of them are smaller banner print shops with 10 or less employees. Then you have dye sublimation houses printing graphics on fabric for trade shows and indoor graphics like museums and retail signage, stadium wraps, and signage for sporting events is becoming more popular. And then POP advertising and decor textiles. Now I'm going to get into some tables. You see one for nylon on the left and solution dyed acrylic on the right. These are rankings of the U.S. Canadian nylon and solution dyed acrylic manufacturers, distributors, in terms of reported usage by them in 2014 for nylon and solution dyed acrylic. And we got this information from the survey that we administered in the spring of this year. In nylon, the number one ranked organization was a manufacturer/distributor, was Glen Raven and Trivantage, and then we had Glazer Mills, and then we had an others area, which was M Associates, Huber Textiles, and Molentex Mills. For solution dyed acrylic, the number one rank was Glen Raven, and then we had Sattler North America, and then we had an interesting others category. There's an Italian company which has a U.S. division called Para SPA Tempo Test USA is a division, and they were cited. Now, same thing. This slide is set up the same as the previous one in terms of how it works, but in this case, we're looking at polyester versus vinyl coated / laminated polyester tables, and it's based on usage by the customers who use the polyester and vinyl coated laminated polyester, and this was cited by survey respondents. For polyester, the number one used fabric was manufacturer distributor was Glen Raven again. Then we had Fisher Textiles and Glazer Mills at the second position. We had Herculite Products at was third. And then we had a list of folks: Aurora, Pacific Coast Fabrics, Haytex, Marlin Textiles, and Value Vinyls at fourth. And then we had Top Value Fabrics at fifth, along with Ultraflex. And then we had Beaver Paper versus Seme at the sixth position. And then we rounded out with Pong. And there were a couple of other miscellaneous organizations mentioned, like Daisyon and Everyday Textiles, I should say. And for vinyl coated laminated polyester, the manufacturer distributor, the number one was Serge Ferrari, and then that was followed up on the second position by Glen Raven, Trivantage, Herculite Products, Value Vinyls, Snyder Manufacturing was in the fifth position, and then we had another category which involved Aurora, Bruin Plastics, Haytex, Seattle Textiles, Stafford Textiles, and Versatile Semi. Now, this last table, we had survey respondents to rank their U.S. Canadian and product manufacturers operating in 2014. But this was based not on usage, but on their familiarity with them. And Moss, for end product manufacturers, was rated number one in terms of a manufacturer / distributor. And then second was Fabric Images, followed by Skyline Exhibits. And then we had Rainier Industries at the fourth position. Landscape was fifth. And then sixth was AAA Flag and Banner Company. OAA came in at seventh. Annan Flag Makers was eighth. Flags Unlimited and Flying Colors International came in the ninth position. And then the 10th was EPS Doublet. And then we had Condor Flag and Company at 11 and J.C. Schultz Enterprises at 12th position. And then there's a handful of folks came in at the other position. Now we're moving into the back end of this presentation, and this involves the outlook for fabric graphics market for this year. And end product manufacturers and print shops and suppliers and distributors, particularly in the survey that we did in the spring, all rated their organization's fabric graphic sales, and we've mentioned this before, but we're re-hitting it one last time, that their fabric graphics outlook for 2015 is somewhat better than in 2014. Now, just to give you a few specifics on this is interesting in that 19% of those folks rated their outlook as unchanged. from 2015 to 2014. So to give you a sense, almost 20% of them felt that was where things were going in terms of their organization sales. But 62% of the respondents rated their 2015 sales outlook as somewhat better. So that was the heavy category. And almost 20% or 19% of the respondents rated their outlook as for this year as much better. So all told, that's a little over 80% saying that their sales will be better than they were last year. That's pretty doggone good. We asked these folks, the respondents, to tell us, what developments or changes or events that occurred impacted their sales outlook for 2015. And what was cited is that they stated that they experienced increases in the getting or acquisition of new customers in 2014, as well as through the first quarter of 2015. They've also said that they've realized an expansion in the number of products being demanded by customers. So they're trying to meet that demand. Fabric organizations are adding to their existing product base that they're selling to their customers. And also, finally, it was new in technology requiring higher grade substrates is driving some demand for products. Continuing on with the outlook for this year, dye sublimation will continue to be the biggest growing imaging process. Respondents said that is growing the fabric graphic market segments, particularly the soft size inch market. The demand for wide and grand format fabrics will also continue as more organizations are investing in the promotion of their company as well as their product promotions and their advertising. In a fabric graphics survey that we also, this is on a different survey than the one this last spring, but it was in October of 2014 by FAI here. Trends and opportunities that were cited for driving demand or improved sales in 2015 included more demand for digitally printed graphics on awnings and signage, more demand for latex-compatible substrates, and we've seen this. Seeing more high-end point-of-purchase POP substrates, we've seen that. More interest in creative graphics for awning projects. An increase in light box illuminated signage. We talked about that a little earlier. But here's a new one, increase in polyethylene billboard products. One of the things, and I touched on this, I think, briefly, but the large printing companies have been investing in technology, meaning faster printers. What that's done a lot to a lot of the smaller folks operating in the industry is it puts them at a bit of a disadvantage cost-wise sometimes because they can't get the economies of scale that the larger organizations can achieve. Some of the threats that were also cited in that survey posing an impediment to better sales in 2015 included sometimes fabrics, oops, that moved, apologize for that, but let's see here, just want to make sure we kind of lost our, yeah, okay, here we are, I apologize on that. Sometimes the fabrics, graphics being viewed as too much of a cottage industry. And again, it's just really hard to achieve high volume economies of scale. Also that it's been difficult to provide a warranty on digital artwork on awnings due to the exposure of outside elements, particularly the sun. Also, moving on more further with the outlook, manufacturers have started to provide more options for customers interested in direct and or transfer printing with equipment that can offer both of these things and is faster and more efficient. We talked about print heads improving significantly, and they have in the last several years. And this has resulted in much improved sharpness and detail and overall better imaging, the quality of images with great and vibrant colors. Newer water-based, eco-friendly inks are now being more widely available, used for wide and grand format printers. They've improved the color depth for these as well as the consistency. And then we've had advances that have been made in the coating technologies for direct printing. Mills and the ink manufacturers have gotten together and developed more effective coatings for fabrics. Now, this next bullet I wanted to call out was something we did about a year ago when we surveyed Fabric Graphics folks, and that's why we use the word recent IFA Fabric Graphics survey administered to U.S. and Canadian in-product manufacturers as well as print shops. And they cited 4 interesting bullets. 35% of the print shops printed graphics on fabrics. A little more than half, or 55% of print shops printed graphics on fabrics in-house, and then 45% subcontracted this out. And then in the next bullet, 45% of the print shops report using mid-range printers, and we call this anywhere between $15,000 to $40,000 printers. And about 45% report using high-end printers. In other words, $50,000 and over, and all the way up to and over $400,000. Now, the future growth in digital textile printing methods is expected to grow, and some of the factors that are attributable to that are the improvements in digital printing equipment, such as the printing speed and the ink dispersion methods being employed, advances in pigment-based inks, and then there's the increase in textile manufacturers are able to prepare for print fabrics to digital printers. The growth in markets such as the soft signage market for banners as well as POP signage, trade show exhibits, and decor textiles, and product manufacturers, and then also print shops diversifying their offering to grow sales. And in the last bullet, I just want to say, as the digital print technologies improve, offering faster production, more cost-effective print runs, we really see the digital printing should grow to become the technology that gives and provides a growing share of the printed textiles that we see in the U.S. and Canada. Now I'm going to wrap this up with this is the last slide for the presentation. And just to kind of round out what we've been going through and saying through this presentation, I want to start out with about 1,800 companies we mentioned operate in the U.S. and Canada. Some 90% of those are in-product manufacturers. Polyester was cited as the most used synthetic fabric in the U.S. Canadian fabric graphics market, with about 69% of that being polyester being their share, followed by solution dyed acrylic at about 12% and at 10%. Awnings and canopies, as we saw, was the #1 new fabric graphics market segment being used in 2014-2015, with a 29% share of all the market segments that were cited by survey respondents. Dye sub-transfer was cited as the leading imaging process used by survey respondents, and that was with about a 28% share of all the imaging processes used by product manufacturers in the fabric graphic U.S.-Canada fabric graphics market. We also, this came out a couple of times, the use of latex and UV curable imaging process in the U.S. and Canada and product fabric graphics market, which came in at 60% and 13% respectively of the share of the market. UV orders were up. This is something new I wanted to mention. UV orders were up 55% in the first quarter. And then 1 minute left here. Seeing improved longer-lasting inks for outdoor use, which resist UV rays better than in the past for the non-solid category. As a percent of organizational sales in 2014, the outdoor banner and sign market was cited as the most highest selling segment at about 26%, and trade show graphics came in about 17%. We talked about how digital graphic applications grew at 15% in 2014, which was up from the 10% we saw in 2010, excuse me. Digital printers today are providing users with better print quality and higher quality resolution. We talked about that. Greater durability that they offer. More improved ink receptive coating that may help reduce the cost because they use less ink. Tension fabric graphics and frame systems like SEG being the new standard at trade shows. And finally, larger fabric graphic market segments like banners and vinyl are growing slowly compared to the faster growing market segments like point of purchase, trade show graphics, and decor textiles. So that concludes the presentation, and what we're going to do now is we're going to move into the question portion of today's presentation, and so we will begin with that now. I'll turn that over to Mike and Valerie to sort through those, and then we'll take those questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jeff. That was a very thorough research study. And we did have a few questions that came through. The first one we'll start off with, do you have any feel for a shift in how much fabric is being sourced from U.S. and Canadian mills versus China, Europe, and others?
I don't know that I would call a shift. I think it's been going on for a while now, for a handful of years. I mean, I've seen this issue come up. I started here in 2007. I saw this issue really coming up more and more around 2009, 2010. But I think the shift is coming more in favor of in the U.S. and Canada mills, particularly with China wrestling with their own economy right now, and also because China has really purposefully their government in terms of their economy has really shifted to try to get away from having more of an over-reliance on exports and relying more on their domestic economy. So I think if there's a shift, I think it's to the benefit of the U.S. and Canadian mills garnering more business. And also because they've been working hard to improve their business, they're investing in their business. We're seeing more and more of that. And hopefully that will continue to go on as we go forward.
Okay, the next question is kind of related to that. With the strength of the dollar, do you anticipate more pressure on imported fabrics from China and Europe?
In the short run, probably we'll see some of that, but I don't see it as a long term because, as you know, currencies fluctuate. One of the things that is going to help us also is one of the complaints about the Chinese yuan, is that the complaint was from the U.S. and other countries, I should say, is that their currency was almost artificially being kept too low in other words, that they were capturing a lot of the exports or imports over here, and that was tough to compete with for our domestic organizations. But I'm seeing more and more that now the yuan has actually come down in the last, I would say, year. This year has been an interesting year for that phenomenon. So in other words, I think we're going to be able to compete better in the long run.
Jeff, did many end product manufacturers report needing a variety of print technologies in-house to meet the needs of their customers, or were they more focused on just having one or two print technologies?
I think most of them were within one or two, anywhere from 1 to 3. But when they get these surges, one of the things that, as I mentioned, sometimes it's hard for them to keep skilled labor on hand year in, year out, and that's always been. I've seen that as something mentioned over the last, since 2008, as a challenge for end product manufacturers. But this year in particular, I think it's gotten better. So in other words, when they do it, they don't invest in hiring, per se, somebody, but they might go to a temporary employees to get them through surges of business. But the hope is, and I think we all hope that this will change, that the business levels will grow more and more for the domestic and product manufacturers in the sense that they'll be able to employ permanent, full-time employees and keep them. That's the challenge also, is keeping these people.
Speaking of employees, do you have any thoughts on where people are getting, on slide 16 you mentioned knowledgeable sales staff, customers are demanding skilled workers. Do you have any thoughts on where people are getting this info for the new skills?
Well, a big thing, one of the things we here at IFAI are getting engaged in on that is we have what we call our Makers Coalition, where we're going to schools. We have one here in the Twin Cities called Dunwoody to help train sewers in particular. So we have we've thought enough of that here at IFAI that we created a division around that, and we're still in the throes of putting that together. But we feel as an organization that there is a strong and that we are being a part of that effort to help provide quality employees for end product manufacturing. And we're starting with sewers in particular. So that has come up, and we're continuing to do that. And that's not a short-term thing, that's a long-run thing that we are, as an organization, are getting engaged in. And I think we're seeing more and more of it because we've seen a nice response from organizations that want to be a feeder for of employees for end product manufacturers. This, like I say, this is something that we've really particularly noticed in the last year. And as an organization, I know I'm being redundant, but that we're trying to get behind and support that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And then I think we have one last question here is, have you found any reported improvement in the UV resistance of dye sublimation inks?
That's a good question. To some degree, yes. Because, I mean, there's been improvement in the fabrics themselves. But as you know, particularly if they're outdoor banners in signage, they need to weather the sun exposure. And so, yes, there has been some improvement in that. And I think the ink manufacturers are working harder because they realize that this is in terms of just the fabrics, that's one thing, but you also have to improve the ink qualities to support their markets, for the print shop operators and for the product guys. So that was actually mentioned in the surveys as well as in some of the discussions we had with folks when we did this study. That has come up a few times. They say you can't just improve the durability and the quality of the fabric, you have to improve the inks. And they also feel, the people we talk to, that we're seeing some progress in that end. We need more. We need to push that needle farther, but there's a realization that this is something that's important and we need to get behind to do it. And we're seeing a lot of it already.
Okay. I think that pretty much takes care of it. Did you notice any other questions, Valerie? I think we covered them. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending this webinar, and thank you, Jeff, for putting all this together. It was a lot of detail and research went into it, obviously, and we thank you for that. We hope to see you all at the IFAI Expo and at our annual meeting, which will be on Thursday, October 8th at 5:30 p.m. in Anaheim, California. And just also be paying attention for announcements for upcoming webinars. Yeah. Again, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.